Hey, Tony.
Good morning, Gretchen. How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well and honored to talk with you. I think this is one of those subjects that a lot of the main news, they like to say they report on it, but they really don't.
Good
It's glossed
assessment.
over.
Well, especially with this doc that I have coming out, you're going to see that we don't shy away from anything.
That's great because I think this has been a huge problem forever. I think since the day we crawled out of the muck, and yet, why now? Is it because of the celebrities that have been involved in sexual harassment? Is that what has turned this wheel?
Yeah, that's part of it, definitely, because they have the notoriety and the name, right? And well-known journalists. I think when my case happened 2.5 years ago against Fox News and the former chair there, Roger Ailes, it got a lot of attention. And then, of course, you had the Harvey Weinstein allegations, and so that brought in all of Hollywood to the mix. But what I really wanted to do with this documentary, Breaking the Silence, was focus on the every woman. Because what I found out after my story broke was that this is a pervasive epidemic across our entire nation and across every profession. And I wanted to focus on the women who didn't have that notoriety or the means, quite honestly, to be able to come forward. So 3 of the women that we focus on as I traveled across the country worked at McDonald's. They're fast food workers making minimum wage. Some of them are still there, some are not, but nobody has ever had the courage to broadcast their stories. Because oftentimes with powerful organizations and companies, we shy away from that because of what might be consequences. And so in this documentary, we're not doing that. We are telling their stories for the first time. And we are traveling across the country and demanding answers. And I'm jumping out of a lot of cars to try and get those answers and hold people accountable.
Well, this is, going back to just raw journalism, too. This is what you do.
Right.
And it has kind of changed. The journalism and how we report news has changed a lot, since I grew up with Walter Cronkite and those guys, Lowell Thomas and... getting the story was always important, not who's funding the story.
Well, I really appreciate you saying that because that is so true. I've been in the business 30 years as well, and I came up the traditional way and paid my dues. And you always had to have 2 sources for a story, and it wasn't all about just getting it out there first and fast. It was about getting it out there right. And that's what we aim to do in this documentary. And you're exactly right. Why do companies, other media outlets shy away from telling some of these stories? Well, they do, unfortunately. But I want to tip the hat to Lifetime for having the bravery to give me the green light to go ahead and exclusively share these stories. And I think that there will be groundbreaking changes as a result of this documentary after it airs. And they'll be for the better, to make workplaces safer for more women across our country.
Is there a story that you can relate to us that really resonates with you?
Well, gosh, thousands of women have reached out to me since my story broke. I have heartbreaking stories every single day. My email box from my website is chock full. It is... I will say that the stories all seem to have the same themes, unfortunately, which is that when the women finally have had the courage to come forward, they're either not believed or they're fired. Many of them, most of them, never work ever again. And that's a crying shame in our society where we promote the American dream. If you think about all the women who have lost their careers as a result of simply doing the right thing, it's a scary outlook. And that's why I think it's so important to shine the light on this issue, because we need to change this for our next generations. And I know for my children who are teenagers, I don't want this to happen to them. And for anyone who's watching this, I know they don't want this to happen to their kids. And so that's why I think it's so important to talk about this issue. That's why this documentary was so important to me, was the more we talk about this and share these stories, the more we move in the direction of fixing it. And if we continue to silence it and continue to cover up for big companies that don't want to talk about this or expose it, then we're not going to make it any better for the next generations. So we have to make a choice. And I've decided to break the silence.
Do you think that the silence is a generational thing? I mean, I've always heard that abuse is because that person who's abusing was abused. Do you think that silence is kind of like that too? Women are taught to not to tell?
Yeah, I think women are socialized to always be nice, right? Unfortunately, socialized to not go in there and ask for the raise, as much as a man might do. And so we need to change the way that we're raising our girls versus our boys in that respect. So yeah, I think it is also generational with regard to harassment. Not that that's any excuse for it. But what I've been heartened by is that as I've traveled across the country, when I wrote my book, Be Fierce, and went on a college campus tour, is that, I had just as many young men coming to listen to me speak as I did young women. And I think that that is a positive sign of change. Our millennials are often knocked for not being as hard worker as maybe our generation, but what I've seen is that they actually like to work together and they like to solve problems. And so I'm very optimistic that the next generations coming up into the workforce really want to work together on solving this problem. And if the one piece of advice I could give to them would be to please speak out when it actually happens, because so many times women feel like they can't and they are silenced, and they worry about what the retribution will be, and they should, because in the past it hasn't been good. But the more that we come together and decide that we're going to all talk about it together, the more safety that we have in numbers.
Gretchen, our time is so short. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for just this moment in time with you. Again, Breaking the Silence is the documentary. You can catch it on Lifetime. And I want to thank you also for being that example, because, doing and saying are two different things, and your story is just absolutely heartbreaking, and yet it's a triumphant story. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that, Tony, and I hope everyone will tune in to the documentary Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern. Thank you.